Hello there everybody, Sam's Trains here and welcome back to the railway. Today I'm presenting the 5 worst model railway violations that I was conned into buying this year, all for the sake of my sad and increasingly depressing reviews. You might be wondering who on earth is petty and insane enough to get so brutally angry over mere shoddy model trains. Well, it's me, because I paid good money for all of this utter landfill fodder, and if I didn't let my feelings out about it somehow, I think I really would go mad. So the first model I'm going to show you today, I actually can't believe is in 5th place. It's that unbelievably dodgy that normally I think this would have been at the very top of my worst models list, but today it's only in 5th place. And it is this, Helgen's WM Railbus, which is an incredibly stupid and irritating looking vehicle at the best of times, but my grievances with this model go far beyond just the way it looks. So this model is totally and utterly wrong. This model was sold and listed as a W&M Railbus, number DB999507, but that running number corresponds to a completely different design of railbus made by Wickham, and it looks nothing at all like the W&M. Now, call me Mr. Pedantic if you will, but £170 for a 12-year-old model that's completely unrealistic is mind-blowingly ridiculous to me. And that's it, that's all that's wrong with this. What, do you want more? Because, there is more. So most of this model is just a stupid design. For instance, it's insanely heavy at a mighty 463 grams. That is more than a Hornby Hush Hush. And yet, this model has no couplings, so it couldn't haul anything even if you wanted it to, which you probably wouldn't. What was the damn point in wasting all of that material to make this thing weigh a ton when it could have weighed a quarter of what it does and still be fit for purpose? I'm all for heavy models, but for a loco that can't haul anything, it's just patently ridiculous. The moulding quality is just rubbish on this model as well. For £170, we've got all the rivets that are different sizes and some of them almost haven't come out at all. The moulding on the roof is a complete mess as well. It looks like there's kind of bubbles all over it. The interior is just crap. The floor level is way too high to be realistic, probably because of all the unnecessary metal packed in under there. And of course there's no painted cab detail either. So you might think that this is all bad enough for £170, and by all means it is, it's utterly ridiculous, but let's say you want to open this up to service it or perhaps fit a DCC decoder. Well then, heaven help you. This is like one of those irritating puzzles where you've got to find a way to break into a little box or something. Right, so to remove the body you've got to pull the horns off, which makes no sense at all. Then you've got to take a knife to the doors and try and prise them off the chassis. And yes, taking a knife to your £170 model is correct according to the instructions, but they didn't mention that you have to remove the separate handrails as well, so they popped off and flew away while I was trying to unclip the doors. The body then splits in half weirdly above the windows. No idea at all why they did this, and it's such a bad design that the upper body on mine was all cracked around the edges as a result of being jammed together onto the bottom half of the chassis. And here is the chassis. DCC socket, where's that? Well, the instructions don't help because the photos are farcically poor quality, blurry and out of focus. And as you can see, there are 2 photos here labelled photo 2, and the photo we need for the DCC socket is photo 4, which doesn't exist in the manual. I think the manual for this is possibly the most incompetent and ludicrous manual I've ever seen in my life. And coming from someone who buys tat from AliExpress and frequently reads manuals written in English, that is saying quite a lot. Anyway, back to the DCC socket. To get to it, you have to disassemble the chassis, pull out the circuit board, which is connected with wires, and the socket is on the underside of the circuit board for some reason. Which clown designed this thing, honestly? It's also got no bearings on the driving axles despite the insane amount of weight resting on just 4 wheels, and a silly pickup design that has the wiper pickups contacting the filthy treads of the wheels rather than the backs, so they get filthy really quickly. So I think it's time for a bit of sarcastic applause for Helgen, right up to your usual standards Helgen, which is not a good thing, and I think we also need to sentence this locomotive to a suitable punishment. We're going to send this locomotive to Santa Claus's returns department. I hate sodding returns. Oh, not another sodding Helgen return. I'm going to write them a letter. Paperweight now. Dear Hell Jan, Santa Claus and Co. is no longer a Helgen stockist. If you need to find another place to peddle garbage, there's a handy website called AliExpress. I'm sure you'll find it in keeping with your brand of mediocrity. Kind regards, Santa Claus. P.S. Never contact me again. Right, the next piece of festering model railway garbage is also from Helgen, and to be fair to Helgen, I might not like their models very much, but at least they are consistent in how dismal their models are. Anyway, the next loco in 4th place is this. It is the irredeemable Ruston 165DE, and I gave this model a score of 4.81 out of 10. And I can officially reveal that this is the 3rd worst shunter I own. The 1st and 2nd worst are coming up later in this video. This one though is the biggest rip-off, because it has a full price of £199. But because even a child couldn't fail to notice how laughably unrealistic that price is, they've had to be reduced to £99.95, which is half price. I bought this model at that price 6 months ago, and they're still available at that price now. Look at this, 6 months at half price, and they've still not gone. So before we've even talked about the model, let's have another bit of applause for Helgen. Sarcastic applause, of course. So what kind of price turd are we dealing with when they can't even shift them at half price? Well, I'm very glad you asked, or am I not glad? Bit of both really, but I'm certainly going to tell you. So remember how the stupid looking rail bus weighed a ton even though it wasn't meant to haul anything? Well, of course this loco is a shunter, so it is designed for hauling things, and yet the body is all plastic, making it weigh just 135 grams. That's less than the Bachmann James, a literal toy. This cheap and plastic model doesn't even fit together properly. The plastic bonnet doesn't sit correctly on the warped plastic running plate, and actually the majority of the model is made of cheap plastic. We've got cheap plastic flimsy handrails which don't match the colour of the engine. What shoddy garbage that is. Wonky parts which seem to have been fitted by someone legally blind, but at least the wonky parts are better than the missing parts. But hey, to be fair, the model is so utterly garbage that them not bothering to fit some of the parts doesn't actually make much of a difference. They also cheaped out on the wheels too. I mean, I call them wheels. I think a more accurate term would be pizza cutters. I mean, really, could you have made the flanges any bigger, chaps? It's missing all the features you'd expect for basically £200 as well. It's got no working lights except in the cab, so you're left with these ineffective little dummies. Doesn't even have sprung buffers. The buffers are cheap plastic and really badly painted. It really is just rubbish, and the full price of this makes this the worst rip-off I think I've ever seen. It really is disrespectful towards customers, I think. Again, I've not even talked about the mechanism yet, so let's jump in, shall we? Just let's jump in. First thing I had to do was remove the oil because the model was completely swimming in it straight out of the box, and once again the instructions were completely ruined by pure incompetence. The disassembly instructions were entirely wrong, leading them to include a separate set of instructions which were more correct, and hilariously they refer to wiper pickups being on 6 axles. 6 axles? Does that mean there's a second locomotive hiding in the box somewhere? I bloody well hope not, because one of them is more than enough. So yeah, the loco was caked in lubricant. I think the factory just dips them in a vat of oil and calls the lubrication job done. To remove the body, you've got to literally break detail bits off to get to the screws. Yet again, a shoddy design. The circuit board wasn't fitted down properly and it wobbles all over the place. Now, performance-wise, the rail bus that we looked at actually worked, which is why that model is rated higher than this. This one couldn't even make it around the layout without stopping. It was slow as a snail, completely unreliable, stopping on basically every curve and set of points I'd got. It also couldn't crawl, making it perfectly useless as a shunter, and there was also zero torque in the mechanism. A finger brings it to a complete stop. So I gave this model 4.81 out of 10 and a grade of F. Frankly, this is less a model shunter and more a scam. It's worth £20 at the most, and the fact that this tried to be sold for $199 in some places is just utterly unthinkably insane. I am going to teach it a lesson for this though, through the medium of a condescending song and dance.
Oompa loompa doopity-dee. If you're built cheaply, don't come to me. Oompa loompa doopity-da. If you're not garbage, you will go far. What do you get if you're built like a toy? A scathing review from this wonderful boy. What are you at if you're nothing but tat? Helgen deserves to fall down flat. I would like to destroy it. Oompa loompa doopity-doo. If you're by Helgen, then you are poo. Oompa loompa doopity-tap. Please stop making all this horrible crap.
Right, we're going to leave Helgen alone now and move on to the other peddler of horribly executed tripe, and that of course is Hornby with their L&YR pug Prince. Now, to be fair, this was much cheaper than Helgen's horribly overpriced tat at £76.49, and I say it's a damn good job too. Although I still say this probably isn't cheap enough, being that it was first released in 1984, that is 40 years ago. Quite why this thing is still being produced today, I have no idea at all. The model is almost entirely made of plastic, so the body is cheap plastic, even the chassis is plastic. A plastic chassis is almost unheard of. Off the top of my head, I can't even think of another loco that's got a plastic chassis too, but this one does. That makes this the lightest 040 steam shunter I own in 00 scale, except for the Bachmann Percy, which once again Hornby is a literal toy. This was sold as a serious model in the Hornby Railways range. Visually, the loco is totally inaccurate too because of the pink handrails which don't match the body. What's going on with that? The blank number plate which hasn't been removed or painted, the toolbox on the running plate is in the wrong position, and of course the cherry on the top is the clearly visible motor and wires inside the cab instead of any cab detail. But wait, Hornby wouldn't leave us with a model looking like this, would they? No, they wouldn't. They had a solution. And that was to include this black, unpainted, expressionless crew figure looking confused as he points a mal-moulded sausage finger into the distance. Or is he just pointing to the loco and saying, "That's disgusting, I'm not getting in that"? Well, that's right, you're not, because there's a giant motor and wires in there, so you couldn't fit into the cab even if you wanted to, which of course you don't. Mechanically, this engine is one of the nastiest things I think I've ever seen in my life, and believe me, I've seen some nasty things. The basekeeper is hardwired in place with wires that actually stretch over the axles past the gears where they're liable to foul the mechanism. There's no separate bearings on the plastic chassis, again can't believe the chassis is plastic, and the motor that fills the cab isn't even screwed down properly. It just wobbles around left and right. Well, you might say no problem, just tighten that screw and the motor will be secure. Well, I tried that. Yeah, with the motor tightened, the loco just could not run at all. So the screw actually has to be halfway loose for the loco to work. And I think for that we need to have the third round of sarcastic applause of this video, because Hornby have actually been able to vend a worse mechanism than Helgen, which is a surprising and previously impossible achievement, but Hornby have indeed managed it. As you'd fully expect, the performance of this loco was absolute junk. You're seeing it run at 50% speed here right out of the box before I touched any of the mechanism, and clearly the loco is barely able to move itself. Now, after a lot of tweaking and adjusting, I did manage to get it to run better, but obviously by this point I was entirely fed up and sick to death of this thing. Score-wise, I gave this a score of 4.09 out of 10, or a grade of F, and the sentence is to sit it down with a doctor and have it diagnosed with a damning disorder. Okay. Well, hello there, Prince. Thank you for coming to see us today. So we've examined you, and I'm sorry to tell you that we did find something, and it isn't good news, I'm afraid. It's a condition called chronic crapism, and you've got it. It is at an advanced stage, I'm afraid, which is pretty harrowing news for you, but the good news is there are no symptoms for you personally. The only symptom is that every human on the planet will loathe, detest, and laugh at you wherever you go. So I'm afraid the prescription is that we will be sending you to a place where there are no people, where you can live out the rest of your days in relative peace. It's called a landfill. And I'm sorry to say it's a rather smelly and dirty place, but on the plus side there will be several more of you from the Hornby brand that will join you in due course. And with that, Prince, I'd like to ask you to get out of my office this instant before you feel the stamp of my boot, okay? All right, I'm sorry we didn't have better news for you. Get out. Get out. Next then, we come to the locomotive in second place, and actually this one needs no explanation as to why it's bad. None at all. All I have to do is show it to you and it will be perfectly obvious. So the loco is this. It's known as the Hornby Beatles Tapmobile, which came as part of a dismal and money-grabbing Beatles-themed train pack that Hornby insisted on peddling under the guise of bringing fresh blood into the hobby, when the painful reality is that it frightened them away never to return. And so it should be perfectly obvious why this thing is in today's video, but just in case it's not, look up the phrase cynically overpriced garbage in the dictionary and you'll see a picture of this thing. That's right, for the princely sum of £119.99 at the full price, you can get the famously crummy train set grade 040 with the Beatles' faces printed on the side with such low resolution that they're barely recognisable. You also get 3 of Hornby's worst and oldest wagons with similarly poor quality Beatles printing all over them. And the hilarious thing about these packs is that nobody wants them. I made a video 2 months ago talking about this, and I pointed out that Hornby only made 1,000 of these packs. And at the time, every retailer I checked still had plenty of them in stock. Well, another 2 months have passed now, meaning that it's nearly a year since these packs launched. Have they been able to sell 1,000 of them yet? No, the first retailer I checked still has this in stock, and it's now reduced to £99.95, and they've still not shifted. Same at other retailers too. In fact, I've seen them discounted even more elsewhere. They can't give these things away. So what's wrong with this then? Well, I'll tell you. High price, quality from the pits of hell, ancient, outdated models that are older than I am, and of course a laughably naive product concept to top it all off. The Beatles were musicians, and damn good musicians at that. Hornby, I'm talking to you here. If people want to engage with the Beatles, they'll listen to the Beatles' music. What they won't do, and I can promise you this, is buy a crap train with their faces on it and run it around on their carpet. I knew that as soon as these were announced. You knew it as well because it was perfectly obvious. The only one who didn't seem to know it was Hornby. So Hornby, good luck with the sequel, because yes, there is another one of these on the way soon. It's called the Liverpool Connection EP Collection Side B, also known as the 2025 Landfill Express. So now then, a sentencing for this thing. Well, I'm going to bring back Beatlemania in the worst possible way and have this thing violated by a wrong'un. And here we are then, folks, the worst model train of 2024. And right off the bat, this model is here because I'm an idiot. I think the rest of today's models I'm right to be furious about because they were supposed to be proper models and they were just garbage. With this one, I got exactly what I deserved. And that's because I bought it directly from China on AliExpress. Now, right off the bat, I don't recommend you do this. I've done it for a video because it's silly and funny. Don't buy locomotives directly from China because you don't know what the quality is going to be like. You don't know if they've used lead paint. You don't know if they're safe. Just don't do it. It's not worth it. And this loco will hopefully show you why. So it is this, a Porter Hostler locomotive. And if you thought Hornby's Pug or the Beatles Tat Express were the model train pits, you were wrong. This is. This thing was available from Walthers for $38.98. And I didn't know that at the time because I bought this from AliExpress for £79.29. That's $100 to you Americans. And to be fair, all I'd seen of this model was this tiny thumbnail image, so I was hoping that perhaps this will be a detailed little shunter for that price. But of course, no, it was this. So first of all, this was clearly not new, which is concerning. It was covered in marks and dirt, and the manual is obviously not new. Ancient, faded, and yellowing in places. Definitely been around for a long time. The loco body is obviously all plastic, making it cheap and tacky, and it was decorated with the most horrifying red and white stripes I'd ever seen in my life. Like, honestly, I witnessed more precise paintwork as a 3-year-old in nursery. I can't fathom how they managed to get these stripes looking so bad on this. The moulding is terrible as well. The rivets are so large that they look like boils all over the side of the loco, as though it's contracted some foul disease. The couplings were also broken, they just flopped around without any proper springing. And for the second time today, we have a cab filled entirely by a motor. And this looks even worse than Hornby's Pug because it's much larger, it fills the cab entirely, and there's wiring held in place by huge and noticeable globules of hot glue. Just in case you were in any doubt as to the festeringly poor quality of this thing. Mechanically, this loco was a horror show. It had unblackened brass-coloured wheels. There's only 2 axles on the thing, but only one of them's driven, so it couldn't pull the circuit board off a Helgen shunter. It's got no bearings, you won't be surprised to hear, and it doesn't even have metal axles. The axles are just made from cheap plastic. Inside we have another plastic chassis. I don't believe that. A second plastic chassis, which of course is weighed down with these massive and badly cast weights, topped with a poisonous looking sponge. Yeah, kids, wash your hands if you touch that, or better still, don't touch that. I don't know where it's been. Why is this so foul looking? What has been done to this to make it look so repulsive and disgusting? Good God. It's also got bulbs instead of LEDs, so it really is from the Dark Ages. Although actually that's not strictly true. It's got a bulb at the front where the headlight is, but there is a red LED at the back, so we've got a mixture of bulbs and LEDs, so probably they just went through the parts bin at the Chinese factory and cobbled together what locos they could. Yeah, that's probably where the sponge of grot came from, actually, but hey, for $500,000 I'd eat it, because we're saving for a house. Contact me if you're interested. Anyway, here's a better look at the wiring. It is hot glue city round here, but we've still got bare wires exposed, which is just wonderful, isn't it? And here's the ratings. I think it's the worst loco I've ever reviewed. I gave it a score of 3.07 out of 10, and of course a grade of F, which is a well-deserved dismal fail. The sentence is to fix this by spray painting it into entirely inappropriate colours. I've chosen skin tone for the logo body and hot orange for the top of the cab. Well, there you have it then, folks. A stupid looking livery for a stupid looking shunter. Hopefully you'll agree justice has well and truly been done. Well folks, Merry Christmas. That is the worst model trains of 2024. And for those of you worried about the future of the planet, you know, are we going to destroy it? Is it going to end? Yes, it is. And in a million years' time, when aliens come down to try and find out what went wrong, they'll start digging, and a couple of inches below the surface, they'll find things like this, and it'll be immediately obvious what went wrong. In all seriousness though, this stuff is absolute garbage. Obviously, I review a lot. A lot of the manufacturers mentioned today do produce good models, and you know, with some of the stuff in today's video, there are some good sides. I haven't talked about those today because this is just about why they're bad, but there are some good points, not many in the case of some, but if you're interested in a more balanced appraisal of those things, I will pop a link to their review. Well, I can't do it because there's 5 reviews. I will pop links to the reviews down in the descriptions. But stay tuned because I will be doing a video on the best model trains of 2024, and we'll see how a model train should be built. It's not that difficult, I promise. But anyway, like I say, Merry Christmas. Try not to let this disappoint you too much. But for now, I'm going to go and do something a little more pleasant. For instance, my neighbour's just painted his wall outside. I'm going to head out and watch it dry, I think, and I'm going to do it naked so that I'll freeze. Oh, it's just marvellously fun. Better than this stuff though. Goodbye everybody. Goodbye. Please run the outro.